Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Rachel Tintle and I am the owner and designer behind the Creative Siren. So, as I know all of you know, we are in the month of July. And we know what that means now, right? It is officially spooky season. I don't care what anybody says. I love that July is now being reclaimed by the Halloween folk, and I am here living for it. So we're gonna do the same over on our channel. So this week, we are going to go over how to make the book cup. Now, I've been making this guy for 3-4 years now. I usually pair him with my black flame candle, but that'll come later, don't you worry. So we're gonna just go ahead and jump right into this. So I am going to let you know though, that unfortunately, I'm going to have to piece this into 2 videos. Please don't hate me. This video there's a lot of like little moving pieces here. There's a lot of dry time, a lot of sculpting. There's just a lot going on with it. So I had no choice but to do 2 parts. So I will put up the second part tomorrow, but that'll all work out fine because there's going to be some dry time that you're gonna need to let this, cure or dry before you can move on to the other pieces. So for those of you that like to sculpt and do this with me, this will be the perfect opportunity for you guys to just take it one step at a time. So with all of that being said, let's go ahead and just jump right in. Let's go ahead and jump into making all of the clay pieces for our book cup. Okay, the first thing you're going to want to do here is just roll out a thin piece of clay. And we're going to measure it out to be about 6.5 inches tall and about 1 inch in width. Now when you're done cutting off your clay, go ahead and just pick it up very gently so you don't distort it and stick it onto your tumbler. I made it 6.5 inches because I will eventually be taping off the top rim of our cup, and it's really important for this design to do so, and you'll see why when we go ahead and texture the cup later. The next thing you're going to do is roll out a thin piece of clay. It's going to be no thicker than 1/2 inch, and it's going to taper at one end, as this is going to form the snake that's going to go on the binding of our book cup. Now go ahead and place that once you have the correct width that you'd like of your little snake, and squiggle his body so that it just looks like a natural snake curving along that binding right there. And when you have it placed to where you like, go ahead and cut off the rest of the little rope there, about anywhere between 1/2 inch to 1 inch from the end of that straight piece of clay. And we're gonna start forming the head. Now there's no rhyme or reason to how I did this. It's literally just like a teardrop, but it comes to more of a point towards the end, and then I just attach it. And here I'm just using my little silicone tip tool to really blend that line between the body of the snake and the head of the snake. And then we're just going to grab a small ball tool, and we're going to create these little dots all over the body of our snake. Once you're through adding the dots throughout the body of your snake, go ahead and grab a silicone tip tool and just very gently graze the clay around your snake, and this is going to cause these little divots and scratches throughout your snake piece that's going to look more like aged metal after we've painted it. And then go ahead and bake your little snaky guy, following the directions on the back of your clay packaging. And while your little snaky is cooling, we can go ahead and move on to the other clay pieces. Just like we did with our other little snaky guy, we're going to roll out a piece of clay, but this time it's going to be no thicker than 1/4 of an inch. Now once you get it to roughly 12 inches long, go ahead and cut off the excess and then form a knot in the middle of your clay, so it almost looks like a pretzel. And then bring that inner piece forward and towards the center, and that back piece we're going to loop around in the back and then form another little loop and then cut it off at a diagonal and just press it into the rest of the body of the snake. And then cut off the excess in the front piece. And just like we did before with the head of our snake, we're just going to create like an upside down teardrop, but then bring it to a point. Just remember that this head is going to be smaller than the other head that we just did for the binding of our book. And then just like we did with the other snake, we're going to go ahead and grab our ball tool and dot the entire body. And if it's easier for you at this point, you can actually pick up your little snaky guy and go ahead and press them onto your cup here. It makes dotting a little bit easier just because you can maneuver the cup a little bit more than you can when he's just sitting still on a stationary platform. And once you're done with this guy, go ahead and make a second one of this exact same guy, except the only difference is that the second one is going to be placed down at the very bottom of the cup. Once those little snakies are done, we're going to create the eye piece that will go around the eye of our book cup. So what I'm going to do to create that is I'm going to roll out a piece of clay that's about 1/2 inch thick. Sorry, there's little fingers that are trying to help here. That would be my daughter. And we're going to form an oval on the cup. It doesn't quite matter where you're placing this on your cup because we can maneuver that after we're done baking it. And here I'm just blending those pieces together so that it's kind of seamless. And then adjusting it so that it is the shape and the size that I want it to be to perfectly fit that little eyeball that we're going to place in the center. And then go ahead and flatten out the top so it's not too round. Now the next thing you're going to do is roll out just a little piece of clay and we're going to create the clasp on our little eyepiece. Now it's going to be just a rectangle piece. You can totally make this up to your discretion. I like to make mine thinner and longer. So it's about maybe a little under 1 inch tall and then maybe about 1/2 inch wide. Or sorry, 1.5 inches wide. And then I'm going to pick that up very gently and then place that over on the outer right side of our eyepiece. And I'm using a silicone tip tool just to push it into that crevice so that it looks like it's all one cohesive piece. And then dome it over, but be sure that you're leaving a little bit of a gap between the oval eyepiece and the clasp because we will have stitching that goes right underneath that. Once we've completed our eyepiece, we're going to go ahead and add in all of the little details that really make it stand out. So here I'm grabbing my chisel. It looks like a little chiseled like tool. It's one of my silicone tip tools and I am just creating these lines that go across the oval part of our eyepiece. Now I have a habit of doing one at the top and one at the bottom because I really like them to match up so it's even on both sides. But it really doesn't matter how you do this, just as long as you get those lines in and as long as you make sure that they're somewhat equal distant to each other. And next, just grab a ball tool that's slightly bigger, and we're just going to add dots to the center of these little sections. I know some people like to add 3 or 4 dots. I just like to add 1, but it's completely up to you how many dots you want to add. And then go ahead and grab your silicone tip tool, and just like we did with the binding of our snake, we're going to go across this entire eyepiece and just very gently scratch it up. You don't have to press hard, it's just very, very light pressure, and this silicone tip tool will leave dings and scratches all throughout the whole thing. And now, right before we're about to put this piece in the oven, if you happen to tape off the top like I did, and again, this was just for reference so I didn't go over that line, go ahead and remove your tape before baking your pieces. And then stick those bad boys in the oven and follow the directions on the back of your packaging for the correct time and temperature. Once your pieces have all cooled down, I like to retape the very top of my cup, again for reference, but we are going to start getting into painting and other things, so it's good to have. So at this point, before I fully remove the pieces off my cup, and since they're still kind of stuck there, I like to take a tape measure and I measure out from the end of my eyepiece where the clasp is to 3 inches, make a mark, 3.5 inches, make a mark, and 4 inches, make a mark. And then I'll remove my pieces at this point. So at that 3.5 to 4 inch mark, I will add a piece of tape. And again, this piece of tape is just for reference. At this point, I do bring back my pieces and I make a little line where the end of my clasp is, and that's going to help you on later. And I start drawing my lines. This is where our stitching is going to come into play. So just take a permanent marker and start drawing out these lines so that it creates this really good perimeter around your eyepiece. And we're going to do the same with our little snakies here. But the line that we're going to draw is going to go right underneath where their head connects to their body, so it looks like they're overlapping on the lines, and do that on both sides. And then at this point, just add the lines how you want to. Wherever you want stitching, go ahead and add lines. Now I like to have that piece of tape there as a reference, because on the other side of that tape, we want to make sure that there's enough room for a quote if you happen to want to put some kind of vinyl quote there. And there's no rhyme or reason to how I do this. I try and mimic the real thing as much as possible, but ultimately I'm just drawing lines. Once you have all of your lines drawn out, grab a hot glue gun and we're going to trace over every one of these lines with your hot glue gun. I do tend to taper the hot glue so it's not so thick at the very ends of these lines, and that way, you'll see later, but that way the texture of our book will lay flat. And once I have gone over and coated our lines with one layer of hot glue, I will do a second one because I really want this stitching to stick up and really be pronounced. And if you notice, I did leave a little bit of a space where the head of our little snakes are going to lie and then where the end of our clasp is. And I do that on purpose because after making these for so many years, I found that sometimes the head or the clasp will break if those lines are connecting and there's hot glue there. Now for the fun part, this is going to create the texture of our book cup. So I'm just using a paper bag from my local grocery store, and I'm removing the handles on both sides. And I'm also going to cut off the very bottom part of the paper bag. So now that we're just left with the body of our bag, we're going to go ahead and cut along that inside line there that's right to the right of our center mark. And that's going to be about as much of the paper bag here that you're going to need to cover your entire cup. And now it's time to crinkle our paper. Now, if you've ever done this in school, you'll know how much fun this is. We used to do this to make like old looking treasure maps, but you're going to crinkle and then uncrinkle until your paper just feels like a very soft piece of cloth. And when you get it to that point, go ahead and flatten it out as much as you can. And remove the middle tape here that we have on our tumbler. And now we're going to add our texture. So at this point, this is really easy. So we're just going to take some Mod Podge, we're going to spread it around to the side that doesn't have any kind of texturing or where the stitching is going to go, and we're going to start there because it's flat. So add a liberal amount of Mod Podge and then put on your paper bag and really smooth it out as you go. Realistically, we don't want all of the bumps and crevices of the paper bag. We just want that crinkled texture that it gave us. And then here I'm using my fingertips and my fingernails to really push that paper bag into the seams of the hot glue that we have there, so it really outlines all of those protruding pieces of stitching. When you've covered your whole cup, just go ahead and add just a little bit of Mod Podge right at that seam where the two ends are going to meet, and we're going to trim off the excess here in a minute once you get everything placed where you want it. And don't worry about your seams here looking beautiful. We're just cutting off the excess and we'll smooth it out later. And then add more Mod Podge right on that seam because we really want to blend that seam in with the rest of the paper bag so you don't notice it later. And then we're going to cover our entire cup with an extremely liberal amount of Mod Podge here. The point being is that when we do epoxy this later, we don't want the epoxy to seep into that paper bag, creating like these dark stains all across our cup. So make sure that you seal this off really, really well. Now when it comes to the very bottom part of your cup, we're just going to add some Mod Podge on that inner seam there, and we're going to fold over the bits of paper bag and smooth it out. But don't worry, it's not going to look this ugly forever. We're going to cut out an extra piece of your paper bag and we're going to put it right on top. But first we have to let our entire cup dry, so we're going to move on to the next bit while that does that. Okay guys, this is where we're going to stop our video, and then the second part will be up tomorrow morning. So at this point, go ahead and let your cups dry fully, because we all know that Mod Podge takes forever to dry. So we're going to let that dry and then come back and meet me here tomorrow for the rest of our book cup. See you tomorrow. If you love this video, be sure to click here to see our last video. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another tutorial. See you later. Bye.